Welcome to this month's edition of Ball Fields and Blackboards. We've got Craig, Dennis, and myself, Brian. Here, a lot of stuff going on in sports. I want to begin with something that Craig said along. Maybe the biggest thing, lots of turmoil in college sports, lots of talk about what to do, different bills introduced to Congress. There was an athletic article that referred to Tommy Tubberville, former college coach and current senator, who suggests what I would call a minimalist approach. What he suggests is, okay, instead of all these, fixes, the NCAA trying to turn back the clock 60 years or 40 years or this or that, let's try to fix the two things that most need fixing. Let's limit the portal to one transfer during your eligibility period. And second, have Congress define college eligibility. What do you think about that?
Well, it gained my attention simply because the headline from the athletic writer actually said Tubberville has a good idea, which I'm so shocked that anybody at The Athletic would agree with anything Tubberville put forward. Yes. And whoever wrote the article made it clear that he doesn't agree with all of Tubberville's political leanings. But you have to put that in. But he was very impressed that it's and like you said, a minimalist approach, that we're going to do one. The eligibility is basically 5 for 5. You get 5 years to play 5 years.
Which you need, because you've had all this question of who is eligible, who's not,
And he made the great point that we don't need the 8th-year quarterback. We don't need the 7th-year defensive end, whatever it is.
Yeah, you need to define what, if you're going to have college athletics, there needs to be some definition of what it is.
Yes. And he said that's not an issue that's 50-50. He said, ask college football fans, it's going to be a 90-10 issue. Yeah. We don't want to see guys 8th-year players.
Well, because we continue to see these lawsuits. Hey, I played 6 years. You should give me 7. One of these years was at a school that wasn't very good, or something.
Well, I also made the argument, the other part of that provision is the idea of, I forgot what the other part of the provision was.
Of the transfer.
It was the transfer. The transfer. You get 1 year, you can transfer one time and play immediately, but any time after that, you don't get to continue getting immediate eligibility. So you would have to sit for a year, whatever it was, after your first transfer to the second transfer. And his argument was, it's pretty easy to justify that by saying, if we're still going to call them student athletes, to be a student, you're not making progress if you're transferring and playing at someplace else every year. So his argument was, while the NCAA rule didn't have any teeth, if it can be a federal rule where we have the one-time transfer, you play immediately, it's going to be a lot harder for federal judges to overturn that.
What do you think, Dennis?
I think the government should butt the hell out. So,
that's my general view, but
that's my take on everything.
There's just no way this is going to get fixed.
Oh, the only reason it's not getting fixed is because the NCAA is completely inept and has their head up their bum. That they are so afraid of having any type of collective bargaining with players that because of that, nothing will get fixed. That's the solution. That's been the solution for Major League Baseball, for any type of things. Meaning, Major League Baseball used to have an antitrust exemption. That has gone away over time because collective bargaining between the players and the owners became.
Of course, there's additional hurdle here to this, and that in those pro sports, you had a players' association, you had a union. With not
initially, meaning eventually they became.
But
that becomes a necessary thing in order to have a collective bargaining.
But you would agree that with as many college teams as there are, forming a player association isn't. It's a bigger problem than it is.
I agree. I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of hurdles, but having any hurdles is more than the NCAA can jump over at this point. And so while I think the government should butt out, do I think there's any solution other than the government getting involved? I mean, for me to ever say that the government is the solution to anything will be the first time, and I'm definitely not recording it here. So,
well, the thing is here, look, if Congress, they can't come to agreement on anything. So whether even something minimalist like this can get agreed to is a big question mark. But this does, I think, take the approach of, I think what we most vociferously would object to is some deal by which Nick Saban or other college coaches, get certain senators or congressmen to go, hey, we don't like this. We need something that's more like 1995 or 1975. And again, this as we've seen, paying players, that doesn't ruin college sports. It's still, people are still interested. But this thing, like we've seen, this as Dennis referred to it several times, says every player's a free agent every year. That creates turmoil. And the portal topic, the portal solution, I think, is a reasonable one. And
well, Tubberville's bill as well doesn't touch NIL. He's not trying to fix NIL. Which you said that's the biggest issue in Congress right now. That's why the SAVE Act can't get passed. It's because both sides have their own issues about whether they should be employees or not and how much we can pay them. You can't put a cap on payment. This doesn't touch that. This simply goes after two issues that 90%, I think, of college sports fans, especially college football fans, are saying this is awful.
I would agree with the fan portion, but I guarantee it's not 90% of the athletes.
Oh, no, because they want to stay in college forever.
Sure, that 90% of the athletes realize that this is a way that they can now make a living.
Right.
And the idea that somebody tells them that your living is limited to a certain number of times and what means you can do it, i.e., once you agree to work for that company, you can only change one time and then you can't change again. Most other people wouldn't take that as a labor thing, but
it's a weird thing in the sense that college athletics, because it is this, well, in some ways, if it's not going to be a direct substitute for pro sports, there has to be some limitation on whether it's collectively bargained or it's bargained. And so even a collectively bargained would end up, some players would go, well, wait a minute, I don't want to be limited.
So your argument would be with collective bargaining, you don't think the players would ever agree to having a limit on the number of years that they get to play?
I think they would, but in exchange for something else.
Right.
There would be some exchange for something else. I think that would be one of the provisions that the universities, the NCAA, the conferences, whoever that is, the negotiating body, is going to push for, and I think would eventually, probably right off the bat, would probably get.
Right.
But it would be in a collective bargaining that they'd have to give up something that the players distinctly want as well.
But as we've seen, even in collective bargaining situations, not all the players have the same interests.
Yeah, we're about to see that in baseball in a big way, right?
Right.
Well, that's what if, and I know this is not, the players wouldn't consider this at this point, but striking, college football, college basketball players striking because of they need 7 years versus 6 years or whatever. See what's happened to Major League Baseball has gone through that and suffered dramatically at the turnstiles because of it. So it's a question whether college football would see the same issue.
Look, I'll give you one more solution nobody tends to talk about. And I don't know if it's a solution. Maybe it ends up in the destruction of college athletics. But the NFL and the NBA could do something here. And that is Major League Baseball and the NHL have a minor league system. The NBA and the NFL have used college as a minor league system. They could establish, in essence, college athletics as a minor league system, in which case they get involved. The players then become collectively bargained into the NFL agreement in much the way minor league players would be collective bargaining into Major League Baseball type situations. And while that potentially could be some type of framework by which you could operate basketball and football together, it probably then eliminates every other sport and makes it a club sport, right?
Yeah. And it's an interesting idea. There are lots of, I think, complexities to.
Oh, sure. And do I think that's a realistic possibility?
Right. Yeah.
No.
Well, this then, in your last statement about what it does to the other sports, leads into a second article that Craig has sent along, that the University of Kentucky has set up, sort of recognized formally what is largely existed at major sports, college sports programs for a long time, where athletics is really in many ways run as a separate entity. Well, UK said, we're going to set that up legally. They set up a limited liability corporation through which to run athletics. So what would be the advantages of doing that?
Well, one of the advantages proposed in the article from The Athletic was that it eliminates a lot of the bureaucratic red tape that universities face. I would argue that's a nonsense. Universities on the academic side, and we all have experience here, and we know academic versus athletic side. The academic side, there is a lot of red tape. It takes us forever to hire for positions. It takes us a lot of time to get anything done. We don't see that on the athletic side. They get things done much quicker than we do. They hire coaches and do things much quicker than we do. So I don't think that is the big advantage. The big advantage to me is the ability to make quick decisions on how you generate revenue. One of the big things that Kentucky has done already is starting. They've bought land near their football stadium that they're going to try to develop restaurants and entertainment area and things like that. That can be done much more quickly through a limited liability than can be done through the university side.
You can
that revenue generation can be much quicker.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an idea that I've kind of promoted for a long time, that even without the red tape so much so, but some of the restrictions on college athletics, whether Title IX or whatever, say, let this run as its own entity. You pay royalties for the naming rights or the use of logos or names. But it is interesting, I think. The one element I thought that is a mistake, and this goes back to Dennis's point, is I don't know why you fold all athletics into this LLC. Why you're bringing golf and volleyball and all these non-revenue sports. If you're interested in running this as a real financial entity, bring the truly financial entities into it. Football, men's basketball, at some places baseball, at some places women's basketball, and then let everything else run like the theater department. Make a decision. We want to run this as a club sport. We want to set up a league of teams that are much more geographically in proximity to each other. But, pulling all, again, because one of the things in the article, well, we have this $30 million deficit. Well, again, if you cut out all the money that's going to everything else, and again, these numbers are always so fuzzy of what's internal dollars and what's real dollars, but let's say it's still some several $1 million deficit. Well, okay, football is not running a deficit. And men's basketball UK is not running a deficit. It's what they're spending on all these other things that create that issue.
I still think you can include those non-revenue sports if you do so pragmatically on the financial side. If you're the University of Kentucky and you're bringing in $200 to $250 million in revenue every year, yes, the majority of that is men's basketball and football. If you're willing to share that money with the other non-revenue sports, those non-revenue sports can make financial decisions that allow you to still not face a $30 million deficit every year. You can run those sports and still have them under that umbrella of the LLC, and you still provide a benefit for your campus. And I know I'm kind of being the flowery guy here. This is not usually me. But you do have a benefit for Kentucky baseball. People enjoy going to Kentucky baseball. I don't think Kentucky baseball is revenue plus. There's no way they're making more money at UK.
There's some SEC schools.
Some SEC schools, but I don't know that Kentucky would be. But you still have the benefit of having some of these other non-revenue sports that can still be under that umbrella. And if they're run financially correctly, you can still do it without having a deficit.
Well, so Kentucky's doing a case here where this LLC is still partially incorporated into the university, where some others, but at least there's a connection here, right? I mean, a real connection that the university still has a say. That I think that the AD is going to sit on the board.
It's similar like the housing authority at WKU.
But AD is a non-voting member of their board.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. But I've heard some of these others, Utah and some others, that seem much more of an arm's length. And so here's my question in those, that once the further it gets as an arm length, the more the profit motive is going to be important. That it's not just going to be, can we continue to run this athletic department? And if profit motives become the primary portion of this, which would be more the Utah model as far as I understand it, then does track and field have any possibility of surviving? Does swimming ever survive those things?
Other than that club.
Yes, in essence, they get bumped down to that level, because if I'm doing it for profit, I'm looking at some point It might not be day one because, well, that's not what we do here. But at some point, it's going to become around like it would be better for our bottom line if we got rid of X, Y, and Z, and which will be all the non-revenue generating sports.
Yeah.
In which case, then your situation, take the money that's paid back to the university and run it internally for the non-revenue sports, make it the theater department. Or the econ department.
Well, because look, theater has a different clientele, but one can make the same argument for it. Theater exists. There's some constituency that's interested. It has some value to the university.
Yeah.
But
if there's value added to the university, then the profit motive may not be nearly as important, right? Where Kentucky seems like maybe they've set it up in such a way that, paying for women's volleyball to go on long trips and everything. Okay.
Yeah, not only the trips, but, I was looking back last time. I forgot the exact numbers, but, a lot of, as you're getting at, the salaries paid to many of these non-revenue sports, they're way out of whack with what's paid to theater department professors that, even at, I don't want to get too close to home here, but I'll take Middle Tennessee, for example. Even men's basketball, they're paying something like $600,000. I think I looked it up. I thought, I'm guessing given their attendance, now it does generate revenue, but you can see at universities like MTSU, volleyball coaches being paid $150,000. That makes no sense. If you run it, if you're going to run it, well, these people need to be paid much more in line with what we're paying other areas of the university.
What you were mentioning, the idea for profit being the driver of every decision, the article kind of makes the distinction with Kentucky being an LLC versus taking on private equity money, which the article sort of implicates private equity as being purely profit driven. So Utah taking on private equity money is much more likely to fall under this idea. Well, okay, we're dramatically driven only by how much money we can make. But even UK's, I forget the name of what their LLC, Blue, whatever it is, Blue Nation, whatever. They've got outside people. The owner of Fanatics or the founder of Fanatics is on that board. So those people are financially driven by profit. So it'll be interesting to see. Yeah. They're a voting member, and it's only 7 members on that board, I think is what it was. So how long does it take for 4 of those individuals to say, you're right, we don't need these other sports?
Right.
I couldn't think of the term private equity when I was saying it. So
I threw it out 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I think they helped me out there. So.
Somewhat related to this was a Wall Street Journal article talking about St. John's and Rick Pitino and their decision of we're not recruiting high school students anymore. We're just recruiting people who are already college or foreign players. And, again, that's going to differ some in football versus basketball. Especially in basketball, people are in and out in 1 year. In football, you're developing guys often at least for a couple of years before maybe, except some of the most elite players. What was your takeaway from that piece? Do you think that's going to become and maybe it already is that going to be the way college basketball coaches recruit?
I think 100%. I think that if with the unlimited transfer portal, in essence, what you have is we're going to have a tiered minor league system of which, high school players go to one level coming out of high school and just look to get promoted up to, I guess, what he would consider the St. John's level at that point. So
it is interesting how it does turn college athletics into its own version of minor league.
Yeah.
Or major league.
Yeah, definitely going to be stratified at that point. Not that it isn't already.
Illinois, who's in the Final Four, basically has that model in place right now. They have Serbia and Croatia players who they've recruited heavily are starting center, starting guard, backup center, twins, I believe, the Evicic, or however you pronounce it, are their big guys. And that's Underwood's model. He said 2 years ago, we said we're going to go find Europeans that can play. And Stojakovic's son, is a starter, maybe a sixth man for them. So they've recruited heavily, and they're in the Final Four right now. And they do have a starting point guard who is a freshman, but he was an overlooked high school recruit who's now one of the best players in the country. But they've done, the model for them is clearly, we're going to go find players who have experience. Why recruit a high school kid?
One of the questions that arises here, like you said, I mean, some players are going to step in at the, say, Houston Christian level and then move to the WKUs, the Bailey Zappi, and then, maybe play a year here and then move on. One question, where will the elite high school players that currently go to Duke and UK, if this becomes more widely pervasive, what level will they be recruited into? Will some of them still be recruited into the UKs and Dukes?
Yes.
But some of them won't. So, because some of them positions are going to be filled by these four players. So the ones that don't, where are they going to end up?
I think it becomes very similar to, again, drafting high school players in Major League Baseball or the NHL. That the top 3 or 4 or 5 guys go straight to Duke or Kentucky or wherever the case may be. But by the time you get to the 15th, 20th guy, they're going to the minor league system, which would become the WKUs of the world type thing. And so we're going to compete to try and get those guys, and hope upon hope we can keep him here for 2 years if he can't solve the transfer portal thing. So, but if the transfer portal thing goes away, like you're talking about with the Tupperville bill, then
that changes the landscape.
Trust me, that Patino's going to go back to recruiting high schoolers again.
Yeah. At least there would be some in
at least
mix.
More.
Right. You won't go all one way or the other. Well, on a different note, this past weekend started the Major League Baseball season and initiated the use of the automated ball and strike system. Kind of interesting. I want to talk a little bit about what you think the optimal strategy is. It was kind of taken aback. There was watching the Mets Pirates game. Our buddy Chris Bielsi, big Mets fan, went into, it might have been the 9th inning or maybe 10th inning, but the Pirates pitcher threw a really nasty curveball that I think kind of froze the ump. He called it a ball, but even all 3 of the Mets announcers at the booth said, I think I challenged that. The Pirate catcher didn't challenge it, and they showed it was pretty much the whole ball, or 7/8 of it, was in the strike zone. And so that, it's like anything, it takes some practice and getting better at it. But, in as this has developed, there's been lots of conversation about what's the best strategy. And, announcers, just like they do with timeouts and everything, well, you want to save this. And managers have echoed that to some extent. And so that's one of the questions. Does it really make sense to have this in your pocket in the 9th inning? Is it really more valuable in the 9th inning than say, well, we knew that was a ball, but you can't challenge that in the 2nd inning because, well, I want to make sure we have it at the 9th inning?
Well, if it's I don't know. The whole time you're asking the question, my thought is, why do we have umpires calling balls and strikes anymore?
Well, one, I would say, and I was wondering that too, but while this system is relatively fast, it's not as fast as the ump. There's still 10 seconds
it's
or so.
It's not as fast as it needs to be.
No, right.
It could
right.
be. Well,
it could be faster.
But that's between the guy's got to challenge, somebody's got to run it, they got to put it on the screen.
Right.
But if it was an automatic thing, it wouldn't be as fast as an instantaneous call from the ump.
Right.
But it would be about a 1 second delay. And
I wonder one day,
and you would be accurate every time.
And I wonder if one day we'll get to that. But coming back to my question,
I'll pass it on.
All right.
I can only speak. I didn't see much baseball over the weekend, or even from last week, but I can only speak from the situation with the Reds. I know what they're trying to do. Francona's making an effort to save it for later in the game. It benefited them Saturday, I believe, or whichever day it was, Sunday, I guess, yesterday. But the Reds actually had made a point, and I don't know if this is intentional or not. Their backup catcher had 2 balls in the second, third, fourth inning, whatever, when he was batting, that he knew were balls that were called strikes, and he struck out. He didn't challenge either one of them. And my thought process on this is, does it even matter which batter you have at the plate? If you've got a backup catcher who hits 190, do you really want him to challenge to get an extra pitch in an at-bat when you know his at-bat's probably going to end in a strikeout anyway?
That's an interesting
If you
question.
save that to later for one of your better hitters, and it was beneficial for the Reds yesterday. They saved it for Suarez or whoever it was. But do you actually approach this? It's not just when to use it, but which batters are we using this for? And I think that's important as well, in addition to whether we have it late or not.
Yeah. That's been talked about. I hadn't thought about that topic, but, guys who have good eyes versus those who don't. Guys who are good at drawing walks. Maybe they have a low batting average, but they have a good eye. You might want. The other thing is, I think, encourage guys, especially earlier in the game. You can use it, but you need to be nearly 100% sure. I saw Juan Soto, I think, challenge one, and he has a great eye, but he was right. It did miss the strike zone, but by like 0.1 millimeter. Really, you don't want to lose it on something that's 50-50. The value here is, okay, this was 2 inches outside. Or 4 or 6. Now, one of the side benefits of this is that I think it their strike zone gets better and better, because you're not wanting to be the guy who has a bunch of overturned calls. And in fact, even in recent years, it's been interesting. They showed, I think maybe 10 or 20 years ago, the actual strike zone was much more of an oval, wider than the actual defined strike zone, but also shorter, narrower vertically. Over the last 10 or 20 years or whatever it is, the strike zone has become more like the actual call strike zone has become more like the actual box. The other thing is, too, that this system actually defines the upper level in a concrete way, in a way that does not change based on your stance or anything. That was always a weird thing in the strike zone definition. Well, if you crouch, why should that change anything? If I can crouch low enough.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the umpires making adjustments. I think C.B. Buckner was challenged in the game on Saturday 6 times, and all 6 were overturned.
There you go.
So you've got umpires who are not going to be happy with this system, and
it does identify.
Right.
The thing about the saving it, look, I get 9th inning, bases loaded, you got a good hitter up, a higher leverage situation. But in some ways, it echoes the whole question of, well, do I want to keep this pitcher in my pocket till the 9th inning? Well, what if in the 7th inning there's a really useful situation? There's a trade-off, but the idea of you don't want to go to the end of the game with unused challenges. That it doesn't make much sense. I think the same thing of top outs when announcers, they might have needed this if they don't have. Well, yes, but they actually need it right now. It has value now too.
Well, Major League Baseball saving these to the last inning type thing is the equivalent of saving your ace reliever for only the last couple of outs. Like, hold on, the most important outs might come in the 7th inning as it turns out.
Right.
So,
well, I think one of the games I did see over the weekend, early innings, batter was at the plate, and it was an 0-2 count and struck out. Do you challenge with an 0-2 count ever unless it's the last inning? Okay, if it's 0-2 and you strike out, well, now you're 1-2. That they got it wrong, and now you're in a 1-2 count, which is still a huge advantage for the pitcher. So it's not just when, and it's who's at the plate and what kind of counts it's getting through. All those decisions are going to be important, and who you allow to do it. Right. All these young guys, hot-headed guys, are going to want to be challenging every pitch that they think's close to being out of the zone.
Well, in fact, many sort of the thinking was that most managers were not going to let their pitchers challenge. Right. The catchers were in a better position to judge, so let them. But, I think it was Pirates the other day that they said, well, no, the pitchers can't, but the pitcher did. What's the manager going to do? Well, you're coming out of the game. Another thing, I was talking with Chris the other day. We've mentioned this before. It certainly affects people like Craig, who's a Cincinnati Reds fan, living in this area, and that is the TV arrangements with respect to Major League Baseball. That you're sort of stuck if you live here with you got to sign up for some Cincinnati Reds streaming. Even though, wait a minute, I signed up for the MLB.com. Well, this doesn't appear on that. And wait a minute, these games are on Apple on Friday night, or this opening game was on Netflix. Now, there have been, with the bankruptcy of Diamond Sports, there have been more teams moved from their local streaming into the MLB app. As well as on MLB, you can often watch Fox or a network broadcast. And so in some respects, there's a bit of a movement toward a more one-stop shop. But as a baseball fan, it would be nice to go, okay, I don't have to have Apple, Netflix, cable, and MLB.com and my local streamer to see all these games. You would think it's in MLB's interest to say, can't we work out side payments? Well, let me put this. Why don't you get side payments to say, okay, we're going to show Apple on MLB.com, but we'll pay Apple some fee. And we may charge MLB.com subscribers an extra, $5 a year or whatever to do this.
I wouldn't think they needed to do any side payment. You just provide the Apple broadcast on MLB, and that's part of the negotiation with Apple or or Amazon or Netflix or whoever. We'll, if somebody subscribes to our Major League Baseball full season package, they get all games, and it doesn't matter who broadcasts them, but we will show your broadcast. So
now, some of the reason for this may be that the Apple's and Netflix, they want people to have to go to they want people to have to sign up because they think, well, that gets them signed up for other stuff too. But no, you're right. I mean, one would think that the side payment there is built into the initial agreement, essentially.
That's just basically doing it on the front end instead of the back end.
Right.
So instead we do it as a negotiation as the company instead of charging the consumer on the back end.
But you would think if, now again, you don't get Chris started on the MLB commissioner or Craig, but you would think as commissioner, this helps build, we want eyes on the game, on the sport. Things that say, well, okay, Craig, you're going to have to sign up for 3 things, and if you don't, even though you're really interested, you're not going to get on. That doesn't seem to me to be really working in the interest of the game. So it is a bit of head scratching, and this, you see this in other sports too, in different ways. I mean, it may be even more stratified, but in football, again, you've seen this stratification on, if this is showing on Thursday night on this service and this is the playoff game is on this service. If I'm NFL, all right, can't we work out, in Northeast Texas, for instance, where I grew up, the town I grew up in, we had historically received the Dallas broadcast in Shreveport. Nobody cared about Shreveport. It just, but through FCC market definition, and that now they only get local news as long as there's an affiliate of Shreveport. They don't get that affiliate, network affiliate from Dallas. Well, that means the Dallas games are not. Well, it's idiotic. I mean.
Well, I want to make it clear we care about Shreveport. All of our listeners care about Shreveport, right? We're not throwing Shreveport.
Well, it was
only
fun,
Tyler.
Fun back in the day. You got Saints games, which I didn't really care about other than just Archie Manning or somebody.
I just don't want to turn our Shreveport viewers off. I mean,
yes, that's true.
That's important for us. Yeah.
No, you have to live. Essentially, the only people in Texas that are going to be buying stuff in Shreveport are people who live, right across the border. We never went to shop in Shreveport, even though it was slightly closer than Dallas.
But isn't the argument here, we say, why are sports leagues doing this? Isn't the argument that the NFL is doing this because they're playing off the streamers against each other, thinking it's going to bring in more money?
Yes.
If I'm arguing,
Yes.
if I'm negotiating
Yes.
with Prime and I'm negotiating with Apple and I'm negotiating with Netflix, well, I can say Prime's offered me this much money for Sunday night. Now Netflix, what are you going to offer me? And it's done specifically for the financial reason. What they think.
Well,
that they're getting more money.
and these streamers really desire subscribers.
They want content for the subscribers that they're trying to pull in. So that's why, and that's, to me, that's why NASCAR made the move. We're going to go to Prime, and we think it's going to, and HBO Max, and we think it's going to bring in a younger audience. And it is bringing in a younger audience, but it's alienating their traditional viewers. And that's the same thing. Is it going to happen with Major League Baseball? Is going to all the different streaming services? Is it bringing in more viewers? Is having the Reds and the other teams local broadcast, which I think is $20 a month now, is that going to bring in more compared to having it on a traditional cable system? I don't know. That's a question you can't answer right now.
Yeah. When you made the statement, you said you would think commissioners wanted more eyes on baseball or football, and I'm not convinced that that's what they really want. I think what they want is every dollar.
Well, yes, but
the question then, I am so sorry. So, the commissioners may be tripping over short-term dollars here and giving up long-run revenues as well. So,
right. I think that's a very closely related question. That we'll come back to maybe in a later podcast. Well, because we have Dennis here, we try to keep Dennis happy.
I thought baseball was why we were.
I thought
Wasn't that your specialty?
I thought I was getting thrown on the bus for my phone. I thought I had it on.
No. I want to bring up the NHL. First, I want to ask your opinion on one of the biggest stars of the league, Austin Matthews, was kneecapped by a player named Radko Gudas. Is that it? I'm saying his name right. And who ended up just receiving 5-game suspension. Very widespread criticism of such a short suspension for that. What's your view of it?
Well, I'll take partly the hockey view and then the administrative. I thought 5 games was probably legit. The fact that it did tear something in Austin Matthews' knee was, incredibly unfortunate, and I'm a big fan of Austin Matthews, so I hate it. That was the outcome of a bad move on his part. But yeah, was it a dirty play? Yes. Is a 5-game suspension significant? Yes. Now do the hockey portion. Nobody on Toronto's team came in support of Austin Matthews afterwards, and I think, boy, that says a lot about Toronto. That meaning nobody even adjusts Gudas, that nobody went after him type thing. And not only did nobody go after him after he sticks a knee out on him, nobody even went to Austin Matthews to help him up. I mean, they literally left him on and he's supposed to be the team captain. Like, man, the Maple Leafs have got issues that you just don't see. Now, that being said, that's been around the media in Toronto a whole bunch. And tonight, I think those two teams play each other.
So,
and conveniently, the Gudas has been listed as questionable as of 2 days ago, despite the fact he just came off of a 5-game suspension, and he's suddenly like, well, he's got some lower body issues, and so I think they played this weekend. I think he played. I would not be surprised if he's a scratch tonight.
If he is, do they go after somebody else?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. But if he does, there's got to be, there has to be a brouhaha type thing. So.
Yeah. It was interesting.
But I thought 5 games was legit.
Now, again, backing up, I think in a vacuum, I think lots of hockey guys would agree with you. But many of the hockey guys were, well, this guy has a history, which is supposed to have an influence. And hockey, for better or for worse, does often use the outcome. Was it blood? Was it not blood? As part of the calculus. And so, you tore up somebody's MCL in what was clearly a dirty move. by a guy who has a history. I think that was where many of the hockey guys that I read were coming
Correct.
from. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, another question.
I will say that hockey is very good in terms of, if you want to know what the ruling was, they put up the video, and the guy who's the head of player safety or whatever goes through and evaluates. This is what this is. This is kneeing. This is, and based on X, Y, and Z, he's been given a 5-game suspension. They will explain exactly why he's been given a 5-game suspension.
Right.
So you can go look it up.
Even Bettman answers a question on this to a reporter, but the reporter kind of broke him down after, said, well, okay, things like, well, I don't really see a trend in the league. And they say, well, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, right. And then that's fair too. But I will say again, I don't want to sound like a homer to the NHL.
You're a homer.
I know I am, but I'm trying to be even-handed here. They do a better job than most other leagues in terms of being very open about what they're doing in these things.
To the extent I follow it, I would agree with that. One of the things, this isn't a controversial thing, but I was wanting to get your input on this too. There was a piece talking about how Gen Z is changing the NHL. And here's the quote. The play is both of these Gen Z players, both extremely cool and norm-bending for hockey, a sport that once prided itself on being anti-flashy, but the cultural shift that's already occurring is impossible to ignore. Said this group of Gen Z stars is responsible for this. Zegras, Celebrini, Bedard, Schaefer. They're fun. They don't buckle to the rules of hockey's past century. They open up the game to younger audiences too. Is that just reporter hype, or is there something to that?
For the most part, it's reporter hype.
Yeah.
They're flashy, meaning they're fast. They're very skilled, meaning their hands are unbelievable. And so there's some of that, but you've had really fast players in the past. I mean,
what does he mean by, what is he, and I know you didn't necessarily read this piece, but in what way might a reporter factually say, well, they're not bending to hockey's traditions or rules?
I think
what's he getting at?
Potentially some of the celebration stuff after goals, but I don't know that Celebrini and Bedard and some of the other names he mentioned there are not the most egregious at overselling celebrations type thing. And
so in other words, this reporter, I've got to write something this week, so let me write this.
And look, they are flat. And I'm, as a hockey guy, I'm glad that that's the kind of talent pool that's coming in. But is this, this is Gen Z is changing it. Look, I have kids who are hockey fans who are definitely Gen Z. And their comment to me this weekend was they saw somebody score, and as they were scoring, after they scored, they were skating away from their teammates, celebrating, look at me, look at me. And their comment was, gosh, I hate that. Like in hockey, it's very much you score and everybody on the ice celebrates together.
Right.
And the idea like skating away and celebrating, like even my Gen Z kids were like, oh boy, I hate that.
So let me clarify with you. Is that because your kids have grown up in the hockey culture and
the Wilson household?
Well, not necessarily that, but I mean, they've grown up with the hockey culture. They understand, many of them played, so they understand that. Is this article trying to paint the picture that it's not your Gen Z kids? It's not the kids who grew up playing hockey. These Gen Z players are hoping to attract a non-hockey background audience, and that's what the NHL is hoping for. I don't know if that's what this guy's writing. I read the article, and it seemed to me his point was, well, the individual celebration is what is needed in hockey, and that's going to bring in a bigger audience. My question to you would be, will it bring in more people?
I don't know. I don't know. But, at the risk of alienating their fan base.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Well, maybe we should get NASCAR people to come in here and talk about how you can do that wrong,
you
right?
Could say the NBA has bought into that. Yeah. I mean, the NBA was for years not that individual celebration. It clearly is today.
Yeah. Those of you who are watching this on YouTube know what those listening might not. This is 50-somethings and 60-somethings talking about this. So,
right.
I mean,
there's been a meme that's gone around for years in hockey culture and everything that basically plays the NBA like celebrations and not their behavior, but the interviews of the eyes that get mentioned and like, oh, I did this, I did this, I did this. And then the hockey celebration of the same guys who won championships or advanced in the playoffs or whatever. And everything is we.
Yeah.
The I almost never gets mentioned. It's we. And that difference is a big difference between hockey and basketball.
I mean, some of that does reflect, too, the nature of the sport.
Sure.
That, where LeBron James is the difference maker. I mean, have great
and
players.
The aspect that if you get hit,
right.
Austin Matthews, the expectations
Right.
from every hockey guy is somebody else is going to do something about this.
Yeah, Craig, I think, brings up where I kind of wanted to go with this, kind of expanding beyond just hockey. Look, over our lifetime in a variety of sports, this change has emerged. And, I can remember back in the 70s when there would be a celebration of guys that only I would remember, like Billy White Shoes Johnson, and there would be people, oh, man, I hate that. Look, end zone celebrations, I think part of the reaction was what you're getting at, that they began getting away from team-based celebrations to individual, self-adulation. But you've seen this slowly, the bat flip, which first was taken as a sign of disrespect for the other team. Now all these talking heads, that's the greatest bat flip I've ever seen. It's become, you got to have your bat flip and all these. And so to some extent, I've had to just say, okay, the world changes. It's not, I don't want to be the guy that becomes the guy that, that guy's afro is too high, or that guy's wearing white shoes, or this guy's, Isaac Curtis with the Bengals is spiking the ball over his shoulder instead of just handing it to the refs. I mean, one can get too worked up about this stuff. But on the other hand, I do wonder, like you guys are getting at, does this really build more fans? And at what trade-off to existing fans? Or is this more just stuff, again, kind of like the reporters like to get themselves all jacked up about?
Well, it'd be interesting. You mentioned the bat flip, the baseball thing. You're sort of talking about hockey's unwritten rules. If your star player gets kneecapped, something's going to happen.
Yep.
Well, the 1970s have been the exact same thing, and even before that in the baseball era, you bat flip in the 1970s, you're getting hit in the head the very next time you come to the plate. That doesn't happen anymore. We've seen that cultural shift over the last 15, 20 years, that's gone out of the game. And it's interesting to see if that will be the same issue with hockey, if that'll be a situation where that sort of gets phased out.
Well, I think that would likely be the case and hockey has done this at lower levels, and it's going to slowly do this in the NHL. They're going to phase fighting down. I don't think they're going to go out in my lifetime, but they're trying to phase fighting to lower and lower amounts. And as that happens, then you will expect more individuality, because this is the norms. This is what we expect isn't going to be enforced in some way by the players at that point.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, baseball, it's interesting, even within 10 years, that, who was it, Juan Batista with Toronto did the big bat flip in the playoff series, and not just bat flip, but, sort of staring down as he runs his home run trot. Well, then the next season he ends up on second base, and I was giving some lip to Rougned Odor, who just clocks him. But now, who wouldn't be doing that? And again, as an old guy, sometimes you have to just realize, all right, that I never liked, you began seeing, it's for some reason, UConn winning the other day reminded me of this, although I was glad that I don't like UConn, but I like Duke even less. I'm sorry for our Duke fans out there. But you might remember the player's name, but the UConn player who jumping up on the scores table and pounding his chest, it's me. Well, okay, there were other guys out here. But, again, in football, celebrating every particular first down and all, but I finally kind of came to peace with it that, well, if I'm going to watch the sport, and these things do change and cultural shifts, and it really isn't the biggest deal. Now, there is something to be said for it.
But don't you watch soccer? And when was the last time you saw a soccer player score a goal and run to his teammates to celebrate?
Well, now and then you do. Occasionally they'll kiss the shield.
Okay, maybe I've seen that, but running to a teammate to celebrate, I don't know if I've seen that in a while.
But it is true. I mean, part of this does get at beyond my personal preference. The deeper question that really matters more for performance is, to what extent does this reflect team cohesion or lack of team cohesion? Now, a bat flip, I don't think that probably speaks to that at all. But some of these other things where I'm celebrating totally on my own versus with others, I think, because you see this in football. You'll see the guys who, okay, they'll have their own little thing, but they're really interacting with their offensive line or other receivers or whoever when something good happens. And then, one thing in football, again, I've had to kind of come to peace with this of, hey, we got an interception. The whole team is going to run down. The whole defensive team is going to run down to the other end. I'm thinking, okay, whatever. So
at least it's the whole team. It's not just the individual. Right?
Now, if you're under 50 and listening, please don't turn us off. We try to rein in our old agedness now and then. So,
but it is an interesting question when it comes to whether or not this is important to fans. And I don't have any. Yeah. Does this turn fans off? Does it turn fans on? And I don't know what rate. Probably yes to some small degree, but I have no idea which rate. In either direction.
That seemed to be the bent of that article was this is good for the NHL because it's going to bring in a newer audience to the but there's no proof that it is at this point.
Right. You wonder, I can't tell what younger audiences, if the Wilson boys, because they were into hockey, are into hockey. Yeah. I don't know how much you're pulling people that
look, I think that those guys can bring a lot of newer, younger eyes in, but it'll be because the spectacular speed at which they will blow through people and move around people, and people like, holy cow, what did that guy just do? And that will generate interest. What Connor McDavid has done. But if you had Connor McDavid times 6 guys in the league that are doing it, now people might be interested and be like, wow, holy cow, did you see that? And so that might be the generating the interest. I don't think it's because of the celebration things.
Well, right. And I think this leads into another conversation, which we'll say for another podcast, but that is this younger generation is how much is it about the game versus 10 years ago it became about fantasy sports and now about gambling. It's an interesting question of how pervasive the gambling motive for being interested in sports is. Now, maybe they'll be interested in this because there'll be a prop bet related to the bat flip. How many steps will this guy take before he flips his bat? But like I said, we'll save that for another day. Thank you for watching or listening. We'll be back next month.